Hello, welcome back to another episode of Women Who Rock the World. It's a podcast about women, and as I like to say, we like to change the shape of the world today, one woman at a time. Today with me, I have Katie McGreal. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having
Gotta
me.
do the clap. How are you?
I'm not too bad. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Actually, very excited about today's episode. So I'm gonna just dive right in. I'm gonna ask you, like, who's Katie? First off.
Deep. I am an Irish woman. I am a mindfulness teacher. I work with children and with families, teaching skills and techniques to help people feel calm and relaxed. I am a reader. I'm very into reading at the minute, and I love to play and to have fun and to laugh. And I love exercise, like having fun with it. And I play a lot of badminton.
Okay, cool. So one of the reasons why and as soon as I read Katie's story, I was like, okay, I gotta have her on my podcast. Um, is the fact that Katie was emotionally abused as a child. And of course, she's going to tell us more about this. And that experience, or actually from that experience, she was able to inspire herself, to work on that. Am I correct?
Yeah, and I love that the description of it, that I inspired myself to work on myself. And that was really, I guess, how I got into meditation, because I knew that I was feeling so miserable and something had to change. And I wouldn't have felt so miserable if I hadn't have been emotionally and mentally abused as a child, and still then within the family dynamic at the time. Oh, I love that
Yeah,
description of
I'm glad.
it.
So, what happened, Katie? I mean, how old were you, and what was happening in your household?
Yeah, so
With
it
your
was
parents.
the entire time that I was a child, from I was born. I was thinking this morning about my mother talking about when I was born, and my grandmother had to get an injection, and I was just thinking that the what I took from that was that I hurt people because I was born. Granny had to get an injection. What actually happened was that my sister, before I was born, so I was led to believe that she was sick with meningitis and nearly died when I was born, but actually she was better. And I found that out like very late in my relationship with my family, that she actually was better, and she was fine. And then I was born, but and because there had been contact with meningitis, myself and my grandmother both had to have the injection. But I was thinking about, this was what I took from it, that I hurt people and people get hurt because of me. And I was like, hang on a second, what? Makes no sense logically, but you don't have a logical brain as a child. But what actually I think really was happening was that my mother was taking, she was talking about my birth experience, like me being born, but she wouldn't let me be a part of it. She had to talk about my grandmother. She had to talk about somebody else that wasn't me, even though it was my being born that she was talking about. And I thought it was so interesting. I just felt like I was never heard growing up. I have three sisters. One is older and two are younger, and there was chaos and noise all the time, and I never felt like anybody cared about me. I never felt seen or heard. A lot of what I remember is when I was older, and I just knew that the feeling was something I'd felt before. Like when I was 30, maybe 31, I'd moved to a new area, and I was in the back of the car with my parents, and my mother was asking about work. And I told her about some of these schools that I was teaching in, and I was hoping that they would take me back again for the following semester and term. And my dad goes, yeah, right, good luck with that. And I immediately shut down. I stopped talking, looked out the window, and was like, nobody cares. Nobody cares about what I have to say. Nobody wants to hear what I have to say. And I could physically feel it in my body. And it was such a familiar feeling. And I sat there in the car, stuck with them because we were in the car. And I didn't know what to do with it. And I was like, this is like, we've been here before. I know what this is like, but what do I even do with this emotion? And any time that I had an actual emotional reaction to anything, it was shut down. I was told not to cry. I remember when I was 17, my grandaunt passed away, and my dad told me not to be sad because she had had a long life. So I was not sad anymore. I'm just stopped. Yeah, and I wrote a book about it, and in the book, it's a collection of short stories that are different stories of different things that happened when I was growing up. And the intention with that is that emotional abuse is so hard to pinpoint. But if in one story I was lost in the zoo, there was a crowd. I was going to say a crowd. It was always given to me as the impression that, because my mother always said, I didn't know that you were missing until I counted all of the children. And I remember saying this to my friend who has two twins, and she was like, no, no, no. When I'm out with, so we had met my mother's friend, and there was four of us, and there was three of her kids. And my friend was like, when I'm out with my friend and her kids, I look around and I look at my two kids. And I know I have two kids there, and we both still have the children. Like, your mother didn't need to count all of the kids in order to remember that. Like, what? It makes no sense. But I remember standing at the monkeys. That was where I turned around and everybody was gone. And I remember standing there at the railing, and I was holding on. And you know, when you've been holding on for so long and you let go and your fingers hurt? That was what really happened. It was so, and I remember talking in therapy about it, and my therapist was like, and how did it feel? Like, because I can still remember how I felt at the time. And she says, so how did you feel when this happened? And I was like, it felt very familiar. I didn't know what the emotion or feeling was, but I had been there before. I was forgotten about. They'd just forgotten that I was there. And then say in the next story, it's my oldest sister's confirmation, and I'm very ill, and nobody cares. I repeat over and over again in the story because that I'm sick, and the story ends with me realizing that it wasn't a case of I didn't say it. It was a case of they didn't care, because I see a photograph of myself, and I can still remember the photo now, of myself and my grandaunt sitting on a park bench, and you could not tell, you couldn't not tell that I was really sick. I looked terrible. And I remember from that incident, I thought, I mustn't have said it. I didn't say anything. I couldn't, obviously I didn't tell them that I was sick. I'm the problem. I should have known, or I should have said it, and therefore they would have sent me home, or like not made me go to this thing. But when you build these things on top of each other, it gets like it paints more of a picture as to what emotional abuse is and how insidious it is. Because since then, I have been in a situation where I was living for a week with this woman, and she was awful. Like, just really awful. And she would say things to me, and it was all like, one point she laughed about how old my car was. And at another time, she was making fun of me because I hadn't been out long enough. She had thought that I should have been gone for long. And it was just these really small things. And I knew that if I turned around and said, will you F off? She would have been like, I didn't say anything. What are you on about? It was a tiny thing.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And that's the thing, with, as you mentioned, with mental abuse and emotional abuse, is it's often not recognized by the victim,
No, especially not a child, because
not the
it's
especially not the
normal.
child,
This is
and
just how it is.
it's not recognized by other people, because we're the way still the our world is that you get a slap, or like they hit you, then it's abuse. But
Yes. And so I wasn't physically or sexually abused. So I was fine, right?
yeah, exactly, then you're fine.
And I remember recently I said to a friend, and I were talking about it, and I was saying, you know, if I'd gone to the principal in school, like what would have happened? And she was like, nothing would have happened. Nobody would have recognized that anything was wrong. They would have just told you that you were being silly because your parents would have been called, and your parents are the ones doing it. So even like thinking about her parents, so this is somebody that I grew up with, and she knew my parents, and if thinking about her parents and how they didn't have a clue either, and just nobody knew what was happening, and nobody knew how miserable I was because I didn't say anything, but I couldn't have said anything, partly because it's biologically I am hardwired to want and need a relationship with my parents, specifically my mother. And if I identified that my parents or my mother were at fault, then that would have biologically signaled death for me. Whereas I needed to come up with some story in my head that was going to tell people, or that was going to make it okay for them to treat me the way they did. So I
Yeah.
was a bad child. I internalized this belief. My mother used to love the word nasty. She would tell me from when I was about 3 years old that I was nasty. So I was a nasty child. I was a nasty person. I was a terrible person. And I was the problem. And I internalized that because it was easier for me to believe that I was the problem because I could potentially change me, but I can't change other people. If I had admitted to anybody, including myself, that my parents were the ones that were at fault, I wouldn't have biologically survived that, because our brains haven't developed on from when we were cave people. And if our parents in cave people times didn't look after us, we just died. And it's the same reaction from a child. So a child doesn't know that you're treating them badly. So if you there's that, I've seen the meme or the picture so often that if you tell a child that they're bad, they're not, or if you complain and give out to a child, they're not going to hate you, they're going to hate themselves. And that was
Yeah,
definitely what happened for me.
absolutely, absolutely. And that's, again, it's something that it's never talked about enough, is the fact that it's hard as an adult, to recognize certain patterns. We hear about like narcissist abuse, in relationships with a partner, and gaslighting, and a lot of other stuff. And this is exactly what happened to you. The fact that, and if we don't recognize it as adults, how can we recognize it as kids, from the very people that are supposed to look after us and protect us?
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, and probably you, by going through therapy, you came to this conclusion. But why do you think your parents were behaving like that the moment that you found out that they were doing something wrong? Of course.
Yeah. So my journey was that I knew that something was really wrong, and I turned a lot of hatred towards my oldest sister because she was my biggest bully growing up. And it took me a really long time to be able to admit that my parents were at fault. At first it was, she was terrible, she bullied me, and eventually I was like, she was a child. She was allowed to bully me and she was not nice, but my parents facilitated it and they allowed it. And actually, my mother did an awful lot of manipulation so that it did happen. But my mother and my father both were treated badly by their family. They were I grew up in Dublin in Ireland, but my dad is from Mayo on the west coast. And every time we had more than 3 days off school, we were going down to Mayo. We were going down to visit dad's family. We were always down there, and they rarely ever came to visit us. And then when we did go to visit them, they weren't nice. They were unpleasant. But there was an awful lot of, oh, it's my brother, so I have to visit him. It's your uncle, so you have to go in and spend time with them. Even when we explicitly said, I don't want to because I don't like them. Oh no, it's my brother, it's your cousin, you have to. But I could see that my dad lost his business it was about 2012, but it was after the 2008 crash. And we went down soon afterwards to Mayo to visit his family, and we were told we're not allowed to say anything to his family about this. And we all were like, absolutely no way, do not say a word. And I still stand by that. I still think it was a good idea to not say anything, because his brothers would have turned around and been like, well, what did you expect? We got too big for your boots there. You deserved that. They would have been awful. And they would have treated him so terribly. They seemed to look down on us because we were living in Dublin. And they just were so unpleasant to us. But that started because they were unpleasant to my father. And then I saw the same on my mother's side, where her mother, I saw it more clearly that her mother treated her badly. Whereas my dad's mother was not, I didn't know her as like a functioning person. She was too old by the time that I knew her, but I knew my mother's mother very well, and she was mean to my mum. She was not pleasant and not nice to my mother. And then I saw that in my mother's siblings. My mum is the youngest of three. She had a brother who's since passed away, and she's got a sister, and they treat her like she's a child, even though my mother would now, she must be 70 now. And I ended my relationship 3 years ago with them, and right up until, like, I'd say my aunt is still treating her as if she's a 6-year-old child, and like being kind of like mean to her and telling her what to do and giving out to her and always complaining that the house isn't clean enough, or why did you move to this place? Or even like when my uncle passed away, it was in the middle of the COVID pandemic, so we could only have 20 people in the church. But my mum's side of the family is very small anyway, so there's not even 20 people that would have wanted to go in. My mum gets a phone call from her niece, so my brother's daughter, and the niece says, only you and Katie are allowed into the church. And my mother was like, excuse me? Why? Michael's friends want to say goodbye to him. They want to go in. And my mum was like, she just wouldn't stand for it. She was like, absolutely not. That's like, I don't care. And then she tried to like but anyway, there was a huge, it soured everything. And then she gets a phone call from the niece going, oh yeah, it's fine, we've sorted it all out. And it just, my mother even said at the time, it's my mum goes, my mother treated me badly, so then Michael and Noelle treat me badly, and now Michael's kids are treating me badly. And I was like, yeah, can you see it? And I said to her I mentioned therapy again to her, and she said, oh, but what's the point, because they're all dying anyway. And I said, it's not for them, it's for you. And she actually did. That was in November. Well, so I think in about beginning of November until Christmas, she did actually go to therapy. And she said to me, God, Katie, you'll never believe it, my knee has been really sore, but since I've been going to therapy, it's much better. And I was like, I do believe that. Like 100%, I believe that, because we hold all of our emotions and things in our body. But I remember her saying to me she didn't like therapy because you have to look at all of the things that you have done wrong. And I just thought, oh, for God's sake, that's just granny telling you that you've done things wrong, but you actually haven't done anything wrong. And I didn't realize, obviously, at the time how badly she had treated me, and the manipulation that she had created and she had done. But I also know that my mother gave out to me and she complained to me, and then she turned around and told me that she didn't like it when her mother gave out to her. Like, I remember asking her, I'm named after both of my grandmothers. And I remember saying to Mum, did Granny know that I was named after her? I don't know. She was just so busy giving out to me all the time. So I don't even know. And I remember standing there looking at her going, how can you not, like, that's what you do to me. How can you not see that?
That's surprising, because I mean, of course, it's today it's clear that your parents treated you the way they treated you because they've been treated the same way, and each one of us, the way we've been treated by our parents, we have two ways. And one way is we keep going the same direction, we do the same thing that has been done to them, and we do it to our kids. Or we really despise that type of behavior,
And go
then
the
we
other
decide
way.
and sometimes even the opposite way.
Yeah.
But what's even more surprising is that your mom realized the way her mom was treating her.
Yeah. I just think that she like she specifically pointed out to me she doesn't want to look at the things that she has done wrong.
Yeah.
So she,
So
yeah,
there was kind of like a
yeah,
decision at some point of saying like, this probably was too painful for her.
yes, yeah. And I don't have any like ill will towards her. I don't feel angry. I feel sad for her if I feel anything. To be honest, I mostly feel nothing. I've accepted the situation. It is what it is, and everybody makes their own choices, and her choice her choices has led to her losing a daughter, and I am a great person. So she's lost out, and that's on her. But I do feel, if I feel anything, I feel sorry for her. Because she's stuck in this trap, and just I just know my life has improved so much since I cut her and the rest of them off, and I feel like they had been putting me into this little box. And since I ended my relationship, I feel like I've expanded so much, and I can go and do whatever I want in ways that I know they would never, not that they would have outright ever said anything, but they would have made backhanded comments about whatever I was going to do. Oh, are you sure you want to do that? Well, are you sure that's going to work out? Whereas I don't have any of that now from anybody. So my life has gotten so much better. So feeling sorry for her that she is just miserable. I know that she's just absolutely miserable, but also that she's never going to get to experience the kind of life that I'm able to experience because I've had the strength to walk away.
Yeah. So you mentioned what was, I mean, you setting yourself free, was this, did you have like a moment that you said like, okay, I'm done? Or was it more of a process? And how did that happen? I mean, also going to therapy yourself, and just doing the things that brought you to healing.
So my mother and I were in a text argument, and she just stopped replying. And I remember feeling like I had been ghosted. It was like I was texting a man and I had been ghosted. And I was literally sitting here, and I kept checking my phone, been like, is she still not reply? Like, is she going to reply? And I just kept thinking she's forgotten about me. And I always very much felt like I was forgotten about when I was growing up. And I said this to her at some point: don't be ridiculous, Katie. How could I possibly forget about you? And I was like, well, lots of times. But yeah, so I was sitting here waiting for her to text me back, and she never did. And that following morning, I think it was the next day, I was sitting in the kitchen, and I was probably crying about it or upset about it, or I just didn't know what to do, because I was like, I was talking to the woman and she's now not replying to me. So like, what do I do? And I had this really lovely euphoric feeling come over me, and I was like, I don't have a family anymore, and it feels really good. Like, and I think what happened was that my spirit guides or the universe or something bigger than me that I can't see was like, we need to show you how good it will feel when you let them go. Because biologically, you're hardwired to want your parents and want your family. And I was doing everything in order to keep a relationship with them. But I feel like embarrassed saying this, but at that time, I suddenly realized that if my mother was never going to make an effort in our relationship, she was never going to admit that anything she'd done ever had hurt me, whether it was like she'd kicked me or all of the emotional abuse. Like, she was never going to admit anything that she had done was wrong. I can't have a relationship with somebody that's not going to take any accountability. And I was like, you're not making any effort, therefore I can't have a relationship with you. But I had this really euphoric feeling, and then I think it was like maybe later that day, my mother either rang me or I rang her, and I remember thinking, this is the last, like, I'm going to talk to her, I'm going to call her out, and I'm going to say, I feel like you've forgotten about me and you're not calling me. And if she reacts and like apologizes or says anything that is in any way I'm going to take accountability for this, then I'll try this relationship again. Which goes to show how deep the mother-child relationship is, because this woman had spent 32 years abusing the crap out of me, and I was still going, okay, if she does in one conversation, if she says, oh, I'm sorry, then I'll go back to it. But needless to say, she didn't, and I'm actually really grateful she didn't. We were on the phone, and I said to her, "Oh, I've noticed that you haven't really been calling me." That's not true, Katie. I called you on this date. She went through her phone log while I was on the phone with her, telling me the dates she rang me, and I ended up hanging up the phone, and I was like, "Okay, well, I'm a terrible person." That was like, obviously, I've not been going home enough, so this is my fault. I'm the problem here. And I sent a voice note to my friend. And what I realized in that, whenever I was either talking to them or I was in their presence, I didn't have any cognitive thought. So I couldn't think. And I now know that's because I was in a stress response. But I remember sending a voice note to my friend, and I said, I don't know what just happened, but this is what she said. That's what I said. This is what she said. And like literally just replaying the thing for her. And Amy replied with, God, that sucks. You've told her that you're unhappy with something, and she's responded with, it's your fault. That's really crap. And I was like, oh, yeah, that is what happened. And after that, I still felt the obligation to answer the phone to her and to text her back if she texted me. But I also started lying. I was in Dublin at a time. I told her that I was in Galway when I was actually in Dublin, or I was flying to Manchester, and I told her that I was in London. And that was really a big deal because I had never lied to her before. She had said to me, or she had said when I was in the room, when I was about 15, she'd said it to somebody else, but wanted me to hear, obviously. She said, oh, Katie never tells me anything. And I interpreted that to be I have to tell her everything in order to get her love and attention. And I therefore told her everything. I literally couldn't not tell her. If I was texting her, I could avoid telling her things, but if I was on the phone to her or in her presence, I had to tell her everything. It was like an impulse that I just couldn't stop. So me lying to her was a huge deal. Like I'd never done that before. And then about 3 months after that, she sent me a text message and invited me to go and visit a city that I had lived in for 7 years, with her and 2 sisters. One of the sisters, I'd already told her that I bullied me and I didn't want to spend time with. And I lived in that city for 7 years. And at no point did they ever go to that city for a long weekend when I lived there. So I replied and I said, no, I'm actually busy that weekend. But it's a pity that none of you ever went to Belfast when I lived there for a long weekend. And she replied like 12 hours later with a numbered list. I think there was 8 things on her list of things that either she had done for me or I hadn't done for her. And she started the message with, stop playing the poor me card. What are you talking about? And she said that she had been to lots of doctor's appointments. I had begrudgingly gone to a birthday dinner for her 5 years ago, even though I'd been in Dublin at the time of the birthday dinner. I had not seen my sister when she visited Belfast. I wasn't speaking to my sister when she visited Belfast. And just a list of things that were awful. So awful. And I remember when I got that message, I thought, I'm going to print this out and I'm going to stick it on the wall so that I remember what type of a person she is. Because until then, I had this idea of my mother being a nice person, but she's actually a manipulative bitch when she needs to be. And that was what she showed me in that text message. I wasn't telling her what she wanted to hear, which was, oh, yeah, I'll definitely come to Belfast. Or, no thanks, but thanks for the invitation. I was calling her out on her bad behavior and she really didn't like it. And she sent me that text message and I thought, I don't have a mother anymore. And that was the last, I replied to that message and I said, okay, that's great. I need space. Don't contact me again. Why? Why do you need space? How are you getting on? How's work? And I was like, I need space because of this awful message. Oh, right. Okay. So how are you getting on in work? Please give me space. Like, I remember sitting there looking at my phone going, had she forgotten how to read? I've said, give me space, and you're constantly texting me. So in the end, I just had to block her altogether because she didn't know what a boundary was. She wouldn't respect me saying, I don't want to talk to you. And that was the end of my relationship with her.
And like what you do today, as a job as well too, was it during this process or was it something that actually happened later? Was it like how did your healing come about, like meditation, mindfulness and
So I started practicing I ended my relationship with my family 3 years ago, and I started practicing mindfulness probably about 10 years ago. I was going through I just mentally, everything externally looked fine. I was in a job in an industry I thought I wanted to work in. I had a lot of friends. I now know friends, but I had a great social life, too good. Everything seemed fine on the outside, but I was miserable. I was so miserable. And a friend of mine suggested that I try meditation. And I lived on the Ormeau Road in Belfast at the time, where they have a Buddhist meditation center. And I went into a class there. And I am the type of person that if I pay for 6 weeks of a class, I am going every week. But if it's a pay as you go thing, I may or may not go. I did not miss a meditation class. I went in, and the first class was an hour and a half. Most of them were an hour and a half, and I have never experienced peace and calm like it. I couldn't grasp the fact that there was an opportunity to feel peaceful and calm. I didn't, like, my mind was always so busy and so negative, and to be able to sit down and to like feel peace. And it wasn't even just my own meditation experience, it was the feeling of the space as well. There was so much peace there. And then I think it might have been like a year and a half, maybe 2 years later, I did a 10-day silent retreat. And it was at the time the most difficult thing I've ever done. Since then, ending my relationship with my family has trumped it. But it is still very challenging to do a 10-day silent retreat. And after the retreat, I was meditating, and one of the thoughts I had was that I wished that I had had meditation when I was a child. And then I thought, when I have kids, I will teach them meditation. And then it was like, why do we have to wait? Can we not do that beforehand? And my whole idea, or my whole like business line, I guess, has been helping to create peaceful and calm families. And I've actually only realized in the past year and a half, maybe, that the reason I wanted to help children specifically to feel peaceful and calm, because I never had that. I wanted peace and calm, and I didn't know that it was even an option. And I want to make sure that nobody else would feel that level of noise and chaos, and that children from a younger age would know that they can always find peace and calm within themselves, even if there is chaos going on around them. So I have been teaching meditation and mindfulness for a very long time, and I didn't know that there was anything wrong with my relationship within my family. I didn't realize that there was a problem at all, because as we said before, it's just so
it,
normal. It was my normal to feel like crap most of the time, especially when I was around family. But then I even went from that family dynamic into friendship relationships that were terrible. I had such terrible relationships with friends, people that just treated me so badly. And I remember like knowing they were treating me badly, but like they're my friend, so I had to like, oh, they don't really mean it, and all of this. And sometimes I didn't know that they were treating me badly, or I didn't realize until afterwards. But I do definitely know there was one or two that I knew what they were doing or what they had done wasn't okay, but I just was like, oh, but it's my friend, or it's not that bad. And that all comes from my family, the normalcy of being treated like crap.
yeah, that's exactly it. The more, especially when you're young, when you're a child, the more you're treated a certain way, the more you grow up thinking that that's normal, and it's not about like,
Yeah.
yeah, I deserve this. No, it doesn't even go on in our minds. It's like, okay, this is normal. So that's abusive, and that's all the stuff that comes with working on 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 oneself. um but and it's tough, and I think the toughest job was recognizing what was going on.
Yeah, I remember. I think specifically for me, the most difficult part was realizing how culpable my parents were, because for a really long time it was my sister. It was her that was, and by a really long time I mean probably from when I was, so I ended my relationship with them when I was 33. So probably from when I was like 31, I started to get really angry at her. And I remember I had so much anger within me. But then I had to go through the realization of my parents actually allowed this to happen. As much as my sister now is an adult and she could choose to be a better person and to me, or a better sister to me, and she hasn't, and that's what she's chosen to do. But my parents were the ones who allowed it all to happen. And I remember that being such a big thing, and like not wanting to know it, not wanting to believe that people that were supposed to care for me and were supposed to love me the most were actually the ones that did all of the damage.
Yeah. And how is teaching kids? I mean, especially meditation, to kids. I mean, how do they react?
They love it. They
Really?
really,
They
and
behave?
they adapt to it a lot quicker than adults.
Okay.
Or like not, yeah, because an adult isn't going to tell you. There's generally an adult when the adult classes I teach they're either online, so I can't. They're like sitting, but if they're sitting in a chair in like a room with me, they're not going to say this is really uncomfortable, this is awful, I hate this. Whereas a child will tell you, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't enjoy it. And to be honest, when they don't enjoy it, they're gonna like fidget and move about and do things. But once they're not bugging other people, I don't mind. So the kids classes, or the kids classes are not all sitting still and meditating, because they're not going to do that. It is also a lot of about releasing a lot of the energy. So I trained with Relax Kids, which is a UK based company, and we follow 7 steps. So we start with movement and play, and we do some stretches, and it's all about releasing energy and having fun. A huge part of it for me is having fun and giving the kids an opportunity to have fun. And if it's a family class, for the parents to have fun and play games and be a bit silly with the kids, because adults are so serious and we don't have enough fun enough of the time. And then the stretches are like yoga stretches, but they're to like release tension in the body. And we use the breath when we do it. So if you're like standing like a star, and then you take a deep breath in and you put both hands together over your head, and then breathe out and you stretch out your arms wide again like a star. So using the breath within the movements as well. And just teaching the kids about the breath is really important, because if we can focus on and notice that we're breathing, because most of the time we don't even notice we're doing it, if you can be aware of your breath, you're automatically quietening your mind. And then I use things like a bottle of water with glitter in it, which is really mesmerizing to watch, and it's a really good explanation as well of what happens when you're practicing meditation, that the bits of glitter all start to sink down to the bottom, and that's what we're trying to help our brain do, have all of the thoughts sinking down so that it's a bit quieter. And then we do things like massage, which would be self-massage and massage on each other. So there's lots of different ways to practice mindfulness, because mindfulness is just being aware of what you're doing when you're doing it. So with the kids, getting them to like intentionally do the stretches, or intentionally do a little massage on themselves, and being aware of what they're doing when they're doing it. And then the end of the class would be usually about 15 minutes of where they lie on the floor and we just play some music, and I do like a body scan meditation. Or with family classes, we'd also do coloring, because the kids, when the parents are around, act up more, which anybody with a child knows. So we do mindful coloring basically. So I usually give the option, and generally the parents will take the lying down quietly and the kids will do the coloring, but it creates a really peaceful atmosphere. And it's something that kids do so often, coloring in. But when I say to them, you're not allowed to talk when you're doing it, and we play some music, and it's just a really relaxing thing. So that's how we do it.
It's amazing, because it really, what you're doing basically is really fixing, these children's lives, because and I feel, and tell me if this is accurate, I feel that every child that you work with, or that you work with, I think it's better.
Yeah.
It's like you're fixing automatically like the child in you,
Yes,
that
yeah.
there
We
was
say
not a
that.
lot.
Yeah, we say that when we meet up, the Relax Kids coaches, that when we teach, we get an awful lot out of it, and it helps us. Yeah, definitely. And it's like healing a part of me that I didn't even know needed to be healed sometimes. Yeah, it's definitely, they say that you teach what you need to learn. And I absolutely love teaching because I get so much out of it. And I love working with kids because I can see what it's like, or I can remember what it was like at that age. And things are so different now. They've got so much more technology, and there's so much more anxiety and stress and worry. But I also know that I had a lot of stress and anxiety and worry, but nobody was talking about it at the time. And I can see the kids that are like, I love the kids that are like really quiet in the class. There's a boy that I taught when he was in 5th class, I think, and I think he's either in 2nd or 3rd year now, and I see him in the village locally, and it's so nice to see him because he was always really excited to come into the class when I was doing the classes, and now I see him, he's like, oh yeah, how's it going, hi, and he's just so excited. And he was one of the quieter kids, so I knew that because you can tell quite quickly in a class who are the quieter ones and who are the ones whose names you know automatically. And I like to look at the quieter ones because the ones that are noisy, they always get a lot more attention. And I was definitely one of the quieter ones. I just shut up because nobody wanted to hear what I had to say anyway. And that was so I can see the other kid, that how that could impact people as well. And it's just a really nice thing to do, and it helps me so much as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing, your story with us, with me. It's thanks for opening up. I know it might not always be that easy, especially talking about something that it's that affect you deeply. So thanks a lot for
You're
doing that.
very welcome. And actually, sharing about the abuse has taken away all and any shame I
The
ever had
burden.
with it. So I wrote the book and I talked publicly 2.5 years after I cut my family off. And for the 2.5 years, I lived with so much fear that people would ask where I was from, or ask about my family, or want to know about them. And I was so terrified of that. Whereas now I'll practically walk up to a stranger and be like, yeah, I don't have a relationship with my family. And I don't care. The shame immediately disappeared, and it made me realize how much it wasn't mine anyway. It's my parents are the ones who failed me as parents. They did something wrong, I did not, but I do know that most victims feel shame because the abusers have put the shame on us because they don't want to hold it. And by speaking out about it, I've just gotten rid of that shame. I knew that writing the book and talking about it would be beneficial for anybody who's gone through it, but I actually didn't know how good it would be for me as well. So it's actually been really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. It does. It does. So thanks again, Katie, for accepting my invitation. Thanks for talking and telling us about your story. Guys, I'm gonna put Katie's contacts and Facebook and Instagram and etc. pages in the description. And again, thanks so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Bye.